Okay, we are recording now. So this is our interview. Our interview will focus on multilingual experience shape individuals' self-perception and identity through different cultural concepts. My name is Yinxue Xu,
My name is Chen Jiang.
and this is our interviewee, Wang Ziyue.
Hi, I'm Ziyue.
Okay, so our first question is about could you briefly talk about your educational experience?
Oh yeah, I began my education in China where the school system was very like structured and exam driven. From the first year of primary school, everything revolved around memorizations and accuracy. There was always the kind of single correct question to every question. They don't accept diverse answer. I think that environment taught me, discipline and patience. It's give me the ability to focus for long hours and respect others. But it also makes me rely heavily on rules, Like I really question teachers or imagine there could be more than one way to see the problem. So when I moved to Singapore for my secondary school and my junior college, my mindset was completely, shaken. Suddenly, I was in a English speaking classroom with students from all around the Asia. Singapore is a multiracial society.
Yes.
So teachers encourage discussion, even disagreement. They want us to express opinion to, you know, connect lessons to our own experiences. I still remember the first time a teacher asked, what do you think? I was froze because in Chinese school, we were never asked that. I worried about my answer that sounds wrong and strange, especially in another language. Usually at first I stay quiet but gradually I realized that silence, wasn't protecting me. Mm, it was limiting me. The more I spoke up, the more I learned to mm, trust my ideas, even though they might not be perfect. And now I'm in Australia. I've encountered yet another style. Like university life here is mm, incredibly independent. No one checks whether you've done your readings or remind you about the deadlines. It's your job to, manage yourself. So, at first, that mm, that freedom is overwhelming me. I miss the structure of my earlier education, but slowly I began to enjoy the independence. I could follow, the curiosity, design project in my own way, and reflect on what kind of a learner I want to be. Like each like different stage shapes a different layer of me. Yeah, so mm, maybe together they make me not multilingual but multi-minded. Yes.
Wow. So, compared with your primary school experience in China, what changes did you notice in your thinking style when you study in an English-dominated environment in Singapore?
Uh, when I arrived in Singapore, I saw the hardest part would be language, because it's not my mother tongue. But it turns out that the language has something deeper, the entire rhythm of my thinking. In China, my thought process was like, um, following a straight line. The teacher presents knowledge, and you absorb it, reproduce it, and you are done. Success means precision, not creativity. But I started studying English, like everything become more, open. Teachers asked why and how instead of what. Mm, I remember being told to write an essay, giving my own interpretation of the text. I panicked because there was no model answer. I don't like this kind of question. Like so over time though, I learned that thinking English encouraged me to explore multiple perspectives. Mm, the sentence themselves feel more flexible. You would rearrange words, use metaphors, play with tone. That freedom in language invite freedom in thought. Uh, I also noticed that uh, cultural differences in communication. In Chinese, a typical Asian family, modesty is valued, but in English classroom, confidence is rewarded. Speaking up wasn't seen as arrogance, but engagement. At first, they felt unnatural, but later it becomes empowering. Stop memorizing and started questioning. I learned that understanding is not about repeating what is written. It's about like reconstructing it through your own lens. So now, even though I'm studying in Chinese, I notice that habit. I automatically look for different angles, question the why, and the link ideas to bigger context. So the shift from Chinese to English education didn't, didn't add another language to my mind. It's kind of like rewired. Is that right? Like how I approach knowledge. I went from thinking there was no one truth to realizing that there can be many, and that discovery uh changed me far beyond the classroom. Yeah.
What were the main cultural or linguistic challenges you faced when you first arrived in Singapore? And did language help you bridge these cultural differences?
Uh, the first few months in Singapore were, honestly very confusing. I thought knowing English meant I communicate easily, but real life proved otherwise. It's not like that. It's like locals spoke fast, mixing English, Malay, Chinese dialects. What every and sometimes many of them come from Cantonese and from Hong Kong, and probably they speak Cantonese, they speak Hokkien. So what everyone calls Singlish. So I remember hearing phrase like "can la" or "don't play" is quite confusing. I feel lost. I could understand that every individual word, but the fe- you know I can understand the word, but not the sentence. So
Yeah.
that gave made me like uh quiet in group conversations because I was afraid that saying something that is that is not correct. So another challenge was tone. In China, we tend to speak, indirectly to show respect, but in Singapore, people, are more straightforward. Not
Yes.
so much, but better than in China because it's still, Asian country. So when someone disagree with me, my first reaction was to think like, probably they are like, it's kind of rude, I think. Like, they don't like me or what. So, but later I realized that it was simply a different communication culture. Being honest and clear was a sign of efficiency, not disrespect. So, once I accepted that, I started to relax. Yeah, okay, they do not mean to this. So, but ironically, language, the very thing that that no, as I slowly pick up local expressions, people reacted warmly. When I used a bit of Singlish, classmates laughed and said, like, you sound local already. Those moments made me feel included. I learned that, the language probably is not only about the grammar, it's a social rhythm. Like the way you speak signals whether you understand the cultural tempo and maybe also affects that whether they accept you. I probably, yeah. So by the time I left Singapore, I feel like I, kind of carry two voices. One formal English for writing and presentations, and one relaxed English,
Mm.
infl inflected voice for everyday friendship. Both helped me belonging in different space. That experience taught me that understanding culture doesn't, come from studying. It's come from like speaking. You know, Probably awkward at first, but maybe more like fluent later.
That's great.
Okay, so when you spoke Chinese with your Chinese friends and English with local friends in Singapore, did you feel any subtle shifts in your sense of identity?
Mm, yes, I would say yes. I noticed the difference the most immediately. Like when I spoke Chinese, it felt like home. I didn't need to translate emotions or search for the right words. I could make Joyce use, and I do not need to complete a sentence even. Like I can speak in half, but everyone will understand me. But my tone of voice even changed. Like I can speak more louder, more faster, more. animated, probably. So it was as if language unlocked my part of my personality that stayed quiet in English. So when I switch to English, especially around local friends, I become more cautious. Indeed, I thought more about word choice and tone. I want to sound, more polite and even, natural to avoid misunderstanding. I realized I smiled more often when speaking English, as I want others to know that I'm respecting them, as I as if compensating for like uncertainty. So that version of me was mm, more calm, more soft, and sometimes more observant. Yeah. So at first I saw this mean that I was being two different people, but over time I saw it differently. Language didn't split me, so it revealed layers. Um, Chinese Chinese brings out my expressive, emotional side. English draws out my reflective and the analytical one. Both are genius. Yeah.
Okay, I know. So, do you consciously adjust your way of speaking or behaving in different language environments? Does this adjustment represent a different self in different contexts?
I do adjust, but it's mostly, but it is like mostly subconscious. When I speak English, especially in diverse group, I pay attention to the pacing, and the non-verbal cues. I tend to pause more, make sure that my words are clear, and check people's reaction before continuing. So sometimes I simplify what I mean, not because I lack vocabulary, but because I want to communicate I want the communication to feel smooth. Yeah. So, but in Chinese setting, I talk faster and interact more freely. Like the conversation feels like a uh you know like a dance, like quick overlapping emotional, but body language changes too. I gesture more and my tongue rise and falls naturally. I wouldn't call this two most different self, but they are two instruments playing in the just like the music playing the same melody in different key. There are moments though when switching feel tiring. For instance, like after spending the whole day speaking English, my brain feel slower, as if like every thought is too past. I need to translate everything I need to say. But I've also realized that this adjustment make me feel more like empathetic. I've been learned to read people's comfort levels to sense when to be formal or when to be casual. So yes, I behave differently in each languages, but it doesn't mean that make me inauthentic. They are both me. I just it just means that I understand the context. Yeah. So yes.
Looking back on your multilingual experiences, how do you understand the relationship between language switching and self-switching?
When I think about switching language, it it I don't see it as a simple changing word. It's more like shifting emotion gears. So when I speak Chinese, everything feels intuitive. The language carries the warm tones, the cultural experience. I don't have to think too hard before I before I speak it, and it just come out naturally when I move to English. Though my brain reorganized itself, it feels like cleaner, more structured, but also slightly more distant. I I start to plan sentence, check my grammar in my head, like monitor tone. It's not that English is cold, but it demands precision in a way that Chinese doesn't. So the difference influence how I present myself. In Chinese, I sound more relational. I use humor, I exaggerate, and I let my emotion driven my word. But in English, it sounds more confident, but also more like it's not confident, but the way the structure of the English makes you feel confident. It's more like controlled. Like I'm focusing on the clarity instead of the feeling. It's most like Chinese is the heart and English is the head. Both are me, but just responding in a in a different emotional, emotional climate. So, but over time, I realized that language switching doesn't mean it's not me. I'm wearing a mask to speak English. It's closer to um like cross language feeling something that in English in Chinese first, then trying to express it in English and noticing it sounds like less intense. Like this moment, it just remind me that every language shapes not only how I communicate, but also how I experience it being. Yeah. So self-switching for me is not like simply it's just not pretending. It's just like connecting across the world.
Okay, so after coming to Australia, do you feel more like a local student or an international student, and why?
That is something I still think about now, but I feel like who I feel like I'm in between. When I first arrived, everything felt unfamiliar, and the humor, the silence, the group discussion. In Singapore, teachers often guided participation, but here people jump in freely. It took me a while to realize that if I waited to be invited to speak, the conversation will move on without me. They were like, I cannot join the conversation. But over time, I started observing that how locals interact. They are comfortable disagreeing and even making jokes with teachers. They like which actually shocking me at first. I began to imitate small things like greeting people with like hey instead of hello or sharing small personal detail before starting the conversation. Those adjustments help me blend in more naturally. But even now, I sometimes feel invisible line between the local and the international student. For example, when classmates talk about their, for example, like their childhood TV show or family holiday in a country or family holiday. So, I cannot relate. I and yet when I share my stories when I'm growing up in China or living in Singapore, they listen with curiosity. But yeah, that exchange makes me feel probably included in a different way. So I guess I'm not aiming to become local. I learn to be comfortably hybrid, someone who belongs to multi places, mm, but not defined by any single one. That middle space gives me perspective, and I can understand that local culture while still holding on to where I came from. And in that sense, mm, being an international student doesn't make me less. It just means that carry more version of belonging inside me.
Yes. So, do you think your multilingual experience have influenced how you express and process complex emotions? Could you give me an example?
Yeah, absolutely. In in fact, this is one of the things that I notice most. The language I decide not only how I speak, how I s- um how I speak about emotions, but how I feel them when I'm overwhelmed or feel nostalgia. I automatically switch to Chinese, even if I'm talking to someone who doesn't understand it quite well. But in Singapore, like most of them, the Chinese are the mother tongue. They can understand a little bit, but not so fluent. But Chinese feel like the language of emotion. It is like make me feeling better. But on the other hand, English makes me feel like emotional distance. Like when I talk about something that is painful in English, it feels it feels like safer because it's like I'm watching my own feeling. I'm not actually directly looking my own feelings. I can name them without drawing into them. That is helpful when I need to process something that 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 or expand it clear to others. So I often shift the language depending on what I need or at the comfort or the clarity. So there was one moment that make this clear. I was talking to a close friend about missing home, and halfway through the conversation, I slipped into the Chinese. without realizing. She smiled and said like, you sound softer when you switch. So that small comment stay with me. It remind me that language does not translate words. They just like translate intimacy. So yes, the bilingual has changed how I handle emotions.
Yes. Which language allows you to express your emotions more authentically, and why?
It's definitely Chinese because you know the language where I have to. It's a language that I do not need to, you know, uh, think. When I speak Chinese, the word flows from instinct. Instinct. I I don't spoke to think about the grammar or the phrasing. I just from my feeling. It's the language of my childhood, of my family. So how I it carries my uh emotional memories, not just the vocabulary. But in English, English, I need to think it carefully. I need to think before I speak, which sometimes makes me sound restrained. So um, there's also something about the rhythm. Chinese allow pauses that feel emotional. You can stretch a sign into meaning, but English, by contrast, keeps a steady pace. Maybe for me, because I'm not so good at English, for me, it's like a steady pace. It's great for clarity, but less forgiving of silence. Yes, I once tried to write a letter about my homesickness in English and realized halfway through that it felt too formal. And when I translated it into Chinese, the stem was suddenly feel like more warm, more human. One example is that when you when you di- when you introduce a people, you have the group of people and the single people, they both use you instead of in Chinese. There's a 你 and a 您, which shows more respect. Yeah, so
Yes.
uh, it depends on context. Yeah, Chinese gives me more emotional truth. English give me the emotional control.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
Oh, okay. So, having lived in China, Singapore, and Australia, where do you think the most significant cultural differences are?
mm, that's because different cultures shape me in different ways. One if you choose one key difference, it's how people handle communication, especially the disagreement. Uh, in China, conversation tends to be like we value harmony. So even we disagree, we soften our words. Silence can mean politeness. It's about maintaining faith and keeping relations like the smooth. But in Singapore, it is mixed because it is a like typical Asian culture, as I said. So it is polite but pragmatic. People get to the point quicker, but they still respect but they still show a kind of respect, and like there's efficiency to how they talk. They want the clarity but without the confrontation. It taught me that communication can be both respectful and direct at the same time. Then I can see Australia. It was another word again. So people here are more open and straightforward. They will directly say that I disagree, and no one take offense. At first, this is scared me. I thought, are they angry? But I soon realized that it was just honesty. So once I got used to that, I actually like it because it saved time and confusion. So these differences taught me that communication, we don't need to have a global rule. So what feels polite in one culture can feel weird in another. Understanding that helping me stop judging styles and start uh adapting. Yeah.
Okay. How have these cultural differences challenged or reshaped your thinking patterns?
mm, in China, I grew up believing that there was always a correct way to say or do something, but uh you know it show respect by being careful, by holding back a little. But when I moved to Singapore, that changed. People are more direct but still consider I realized that being polite didn't always mean being quiet. You could disagree with someone and still stay friendly with them, but it was a big shift for me because it showed that truth and harmony can exist together. But then in Australia, everything's different again. Here, people speak freely, student like they can debate their professor, and they like small talk with strangers, which is I cannot used to it. So everyone seems more comfortable expressing opinions. But at first, I'm very hesitated to speak up because I didn't want to sound too blunt. But gradually, I learned that silence could be misread as disinterest. So I started training myself to join the discussion, even if my ideas weren't perfectly formal. The process, the process pushed me to get go of the fear of being wrong. What is uh what is interesting is that how this experience shaped my inner voice too. I used to think before speaking. Now I think while speaking. I start to value reflection over perfection. I become more flexible, and I switch between ways of thinking depending on the context. In Chinese, my thoughts feel relational, but in English, they feel mm, analytical and yeah, analytical. Together, they help me understand that culture doesn't just shape how we act; it shapes the way that we mind move. So instead of choosing one thinking style, I'm now carrying the toolkit of perspective, using whichever fit the moments best.
Okay.
Yeah.
To you, is language more of a tool for communication or a medium for constructing self-understanding and worldview? Why?
Mm, for me, language began as a tool, but slowly become the lens through which I understand myself and the world. When I was more younger, I saw language was just the vehicle for information. It's a metaphor. So you speak to be understood, but after living different countries, I realized that language quietly, build the structure of your thinking. It teaches you how to connect ideas and how to show respect and how to feel emotions. So when I think in Chinese, my thought uh, moves, it's kind of like a circle. They connect relations, context, and emotions. It is holistic. One idea grows from another. But when I think in English, it is more like linear. I focus on the clarity and the logic and the evidence. Yeah, they simply frame reality differently. That's why I say language is a worldview. It's not just what I use to describe life, it's the way I see life. So there have been times when switching language helped me rediscover part of myself. Like, for example, when I read Chinese, I sound, you know, introspective and sentimental. When I read in English, it is organized. Both are true, but they highlight different values. The collectiveness in one, individually in another. So over time, I stopped trying to decide which voice was the real one, but they're both real. They just reflect how languages construct identity. So language, for me, it's kind of like a mirror that keeps showing me a new side of who I am. It builds bridge between cultures. Yeah, so it would also build bridge inside me because between the between the person I was and the person I keep becoming.
Okay.
So, has switching between different language and cultural frames given you any unique intercultural advantage, such as in problem solving and adaptation?
Yeah, definitely. I think being bilingual trains your brains to stay open and flexible. So when you grow up moving between different cultural logic, you start realizing that no single way of thinking fit every situation. This makes it easier to adapt. For example, like in a group work here in Australia, the group work I just did for my subject. So when tension rise, I often notice small communication gaps others don't. I can sense that when someone feel left out, because of how they hesitate to speak. Maybe it reminds me of how I feel when I first struggled with English. So I tend to step in, and then summarize or rephrase things to make everyone comfortable. So I think that comes from learning to translate constantly, not just word, but meaning emotions. In the way the bilingual has made me the cultural mediator, yeah, I would say. So I can understand why someone might stay quiet out of politeness or why another person speaks directly out of habit. The awareness helps me navigate the conflict more smoothly, I think. So it is useful. It is also useful in problem solving. Switching languages taught me that every idea can be framed differently, even something that doesn't make sense in one languages. I try to explain it with another, and suddenly it clicks. So that mental flexibility helps me to think outside of the box. So yes, it is tiring sometimes, but it also helps empowering. I develop the kind of the third sense. Yeah, it helps to connect with people and adapt to new environments and build build a bridge instead of barriers. That's probably the biggest, the gift from this.
Yeah. So, is there a specific experience or event that made you strongly aware of the close connection among language, identity, and culture?
Mm, yes. The turning point for me was when I truly understood Singlish in Singapore. So at first, it sounded messy to me, like broken English. People mix words from English, Malay, Hokkien in one sentence and couldn't see the logic behind it. But after living there for a while, I realized that the broken at all was creative. It carried, the migration, the history of the migration and everyday culture inside it. So when people say "can la," it wasn't just a phrase. It expressed probably the friendliness and a kind of local pride. The first time I used English naturally, my classmates laughed at it's laughed, but not laughed at me. They just like in a way building. It's not in a mean way, but in a warm and accepting way. That small moment made me feel like I finally belonged. I was then realized that language identity. I was realized that language identity in action.
Mm.
The way you speak tells people where you come from, where you relate to, so and how you understand the world. After that, I started noticing similar patterns everywhere, like how Chinese reflects collectiveness through indirect speech, and how English highlights individually through directedness, and how each language just carries its own logic of being human. That awareness changed how I listen. I stopped hearing just word, but hearing the views, the word views. So yes, that moments with English was my the wake up call. It taught me that language and the identity, language and culture aren't separate concepts. They were just you know it's showing a little piece of you. Yes.
Yes. Looking back on your intercultural educational theory, journey, if you could summarize in one sentence, just one sentence, what do language, identity, and culture mean to you?
So do I need okay. So to me, it's language they they are the way I keep reshaping myself because they are not fake things. They shift they shift as I move and I learn and grow. So every place I've lived has left a kind of a trace in the way I speak and think. So China gave me the kind of the roots. Singapore taught me the rhythm, and Australia probably taught me the way the openness. So when I connect those parts, I see how language is not just a tool; it's a path that carries identity for world. Yeah. So.
Yes.
Mm, so when I say the language, identity, and the culture, I'm not really think that. mm, I'm not really think about the movement. The constant process of negotiating. who I am, the process of negotiating who I am, they remind me that I don't have to be one fixed version of myself. I can keep changing. Yeah, so yes.
Yes. So thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. That's all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.